People in long-term relationships. What's the weirdest/most vulnerable thing you and your partner have done? When we were just boyfriend/girlfriend, I had to get a cystectomy on my tailbone. The nurse after the surgery recommended using maxi pads for recovery since most normal gauze wouldn't cover the full length of the wound. They also recommended keeping the area clean of hair. So every day my girlfriend would put a maxi pad on and shave my ass pretty much. Obviously we got married. The string broke off my tampon once, and after struggling for ages to get it out myself and failing, I told him what had happened, and he got in there and managed to scoop it out so I didn't have to go to the doctors. Relevant username: caring for his dying aunt. She was the woman who raised my husband. Her own children were indifferent to her situation, so we took on her care. She was confused, incontinent, and bedbound. For 6 months we cleaned and fed her, gave her meds, and soothed her when she had terrors and delusions. At the end we stood vigil with her as she slid into death. Afterward, we washed and dressed her body. It was an intense experience for both of us, sharing an intimacy and vulnerability with his aunt, but also between ourselves as a couple. /Thank you for the awards and for all the kind replies. Tweezing tiny ticks out of my husband's arse crack after a long walk in the moors. I didn't have a single one on myself. Thank fuck edit. Oh dear. Thank you for the awards. Guys, I'm a teacher and was pregnant at the same time as a former student. The student lost her baby and almost lost her own life to an infection of the placenta during birth. I mourned for that sweet girl and her baby, and my husband watched. When I was induced, I spiked a fever and was also diagnosed with an infection of the placenta. I was shaking uncontrollably when they took me for an emergency C-section. I remember very little from the birth, but my mother has told me after the fact that my husband held it together until the nurse took our son back to the nursery. He collapsed into her arms and wept, thinking I would die like my student almost had. The next day, he helped me shower in the hospital and knelt in front of me to clean my incision and all the disinfectant solution away. He cried while he did this, and I have never seen so much love in his eyes. My husband is a man of few words, but the look on his face and the care he took to wash me and help me dress that day are burned in my memory. He picked me up and removed splinters from my face after a bad seizure, covered all the mirrors, got me cleaned up and the floor cleaned up, tucked me into bed until I was out the other side of the post-fit fog, and then brought me tea and toast. Love isn't pretty. It's seeing the literal shittiest times. And caring. Weird. Not necessarily vulnerable. My wife and I went out drinking one night and both of us got really drunk. We took a cab home from downtown, which is about a 20-minute ride. Neither of us peed before we left the bar in about 10 minutes, and we both really had to go. The problem is that we only had one bathroom at our apartment. While attempting to decide who would go first, I joked that when we got home, we could try to pee at the same time. She would sit down and spread her legs a bit, and I would try to pee between her legs into the toilet. We both found this idea incredibly funny and decided to try when we got home. For some reason, that Spice Girls song 2 Become One popped into my head. So when the cab was pulling up to our place, I put the song on my phone and we ran inside to try to pee on the toilet at the same time while listening to that song. We were able to do it successfully without making a mess and laughed about it for the rest of the night. Oof, held my 45-year-old husband in my arms, kissed him, spoke to him thanking him for our beautiful life together, and that I would love him forever, as he was actively dying from an illness. After calling the mortuary, I got back into bed, put his arm around me and stayed in my happy place for the last time. It was beautiful and heartbreaking, broken heart. When he was depressed and unable to leave his room, I led him down to the bathroom and he sat in the tub while I gave him a bath. He cried and didn't talk much, but once he was clean I led him back to his room, which now had new sheets and was clean, and we laid in his bed while he cried. It was the first few months of us dating and now we're engaged. My partner used to have bad panic attacks, and this was our 2 a.m. routine on bad nights. I'd hear the shower start and wake up to hold her hand half asleep on the bathroom floor as she sat in the shower, counting out 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste to get her grounded. My ex freaked out because he thought he was shitting blood. There was this weird moment where we were both staring at his shit in the toilet and his mom was on FaceTime looking at it too. It was just beats. The weirdest and most vulnerable time of my F30 relationship with my guy, 32, was when he was diagnosed with cancer last year. Living together and caring for him while he was sick with chemo was the most surreal experience. He's in remission now and pretty much back to normal, but sometimes something will catch us off guard and we'll remember what it was like. So raw and painful, and strangely intimate. I'm thankful that it brought us closer together and strengthened our relationship. I love that guy so much. Been in a serious car accident together. We both went to the hospital. He had a torn PCL, a broken collarbone, bruises from the seatbelt, and so many scratches on his arms and stomach. Thankfully he didn't need surgery or stitches. I managed to get the worst of it with 3 fractured ribs, a collapsed lung, a broken fibula on my left and right leg, and I shattered my right leg's tibula so bad that I left chunks of my bone in the car. Almost a year and a half, 5 surgeries, and months of physical therapy later and I'm still recovering. Needless to say, this has been the hardest part of our relationship, but we've supported each other even when things have gotten really hard. We've been engaged almost 2 years, together almost 3, and I plan on spending the rest of my life with him. Edit: I've kindly been informed that the bone I broke really bad is actually called the tibia, not the tibula. Told him about my suicidal thoughts. I was deeply embarrassed of them, while also scared because I didn't want to die. It felt like I had brainworms telling me to kill myself. I was scared talking about them would make them real, but it actually got me seeking help for those thoughts, and they went away with therapy. When my grandfather was dying, my now husband helped carry him from the hospice bed to the bedroom so he could pass peacefully in his own bed. It's not the weirdest thing, but it was definitely the most vulnerable. It was also the moment I knew he was my person and I was going to marry him. My wife has very long and curly hair. She sank into a really bad depression and didn't shower or brush her hair for like a week. She cried one night telling me she will probably have to shave her head cause she couldn't get a brush through it, and that she felt so unattractive because she hasn't showered. So I spent 4 hours picking through her hair with a comb and brushing it out fully. Then I set the bath and bathed her / washed her hair. I kept telling her how gorgeous and attractive she is and how lucky I am to have her. I still brush her hair every night and she loves when I wash her hair for her. When she had cancer, I also shaved her legs for her and sometimes helped her get to the bathroom. She deserves the world. She is so sweet. I would do anything for her. I love her so much. Edit: for everyone saying she's lucky to have me. She is absolutely a goddess, and I'm well aware I'm the lucky one in this relationship. I'm so lucky to be with someone as sweet and beautiful as she is, and I'm going to always work to be the best man and be deserving of her. All my friends are probably tired of how often I talk about my sweet wife. I am completely estranged from my family. I was disowned, threatened, abused, etc. by them. I hate talking about it because it makes people look differently. I am also an asylee in the United States. Dating and making friends was difficult. Everyone was more interested in learning about my trauma and being fascinated by it, then immediately become overwhelmed by the reality of PTSD. Enter my husband. Our first year together, I broke down. I was severely depressed and lost interest in living. I was crying every day. He consoled me. He stayed by me. He slept every night with me, sometimes holding me until I fell asleep. He began to research treatment for PTSD and treatment-resistant depression and anxiety. A neurologist friend of mine suggested electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, and I found a clinic that would do. It was 3 days a week and I had to be under general anesthesia, meaning I had to be driven to and from the hospital every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It meant that I would be out of it 3 days a week as well for a month. Without even asking, he went to his boss and told him, not ask permission, told him that he will need some leeway for a month on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays so he can drive me to and from the hospital. He made me food and took care of me during those days and didn't ask anything in return. He never, not once, belittled my trauma or tried to make it this fascinating thing. He was there and he helped me build myself up. The ECT worked wonders. I am a lot better now. I love him. He has opened my eyes to the beauty in the world and taught me how to live in the now. I am so grateful to have him as my partner in this world. I have been reading about this. There is something definitely clinically wrong with my brain in the form of depression/anxiety. No medications work and I simply don't even trust any of the medications anymore anyways. I am better off without all of them, actually having tried everything under the sun and being off of them for a couple of years now. I can function, but my life would be a lot easier without this monkey on my back. To an extreme degree, I could actually live my life without this, and I have no idea what that might even be like. Though I could imagine from my good days. Do you have to have insurance to do this ECT stuff? Do you need proof of taking tons of meds and them not working? Diagnosis? Or can you just simply go to the clinic and work it out with them after a couple therapy sessions? One thing that comes to mind is my husband using his mouth to help my engorged boobs let down when I was in so much pain and about to develop mastitis. I had lumps all through my armpit from the milk building up. Nothing sexual about it or kinky or anything. Just pure pain relief. My boyfriend got sober. He wouldn't let me see him at the very worst of it. But 3 days after he went cold turkey, I went to his apartment. He was shaking and pale. I took him into my arms and held him while we both cried. He told me he loved me and thanked me for sticking around. As of 2 days ago, he is 6 months sober. So proud of him. I fell into a deep depression. Reasons are many and complicated, but had nothing to do with my husband at all. One night, I kisses him goodnight and said I felt like staying up a bit longer. He got undressed and went to bed. I stayed up a bit longer, wrote a suicide note, placed my wedding ring on it and started walking down the street. I was heading to a very high bridge with a swollen river underneath. I waited until after a good rainfall and very cold weather, hoping the shock of the water would make it very quick. I didn't want to do it in a way he would have to clean up. I planned this, and honestly though, everyone would be better off without me. A car pulled up with a man screaming at me. It was my husband. He sleeps like the dead, but somehow he woke up and knew something was wrong. He went down to check on me and found the note. Also, somehow, in a decent sized city, knew which direction to take and where I was going. That shocked me so much. I got in the car. We had a very long talk and made plans to change what was wrong in our lives, both short and long term. I am happy to say that was many years ago and I never contemplated suicide again. That was actually my second attempt. First was as a teenager. We are still together 28 years later and doing wonderfully. Mental illness can be overcome with proper help and support. One weird thing was that my wife helped carry the coffin at my grandmother's funeral. At the time, we had been dating for 3 months. None of the men at the funeral wanted to step up and do it. We needed one more person and she volunteered. That was 8 years ago. My ex got really sick at the beginning of 2020 with what we later believed to be COVID. He was sitting on the couch in boxers and was cramping all over his body. So he didn't think twice about trusting a fart and proceeded to have diarrhea all over one of the cushions. He jumped in the shower, while I mopped it up with a towel. Then I took the cushion cover to the laundry mat and washed it several times. Thankfully it didn't seep into the cushion itself because we were way too broke to afford a new couch. In long-term relationships, shit happens. 20 years soon. Wiping each other's butts is like the least of it. There isn't much we haven't been through together, including illness, fights, tripping, deaths in the family and more. I think the weirdest shit isn't something I'd comfortably post on Maine, but I think one of the most vulnerable moments was going through home invasion/robbery together. My wife was going blind from her IUD. We didn't have health insurance, so she drank some whiskey and I took it out of her. My cervix prolapsed and he pushed it back up for me. I was crying, terrified. It's fine now. It stayed up. We pour out our emotions every Friday night in bed and cry together to start Saturday fresh. I was in a pretty bad accident. Broke my pelvis twice, my back in 5 places, various other things. So I was basically fucked. The missus would help into the bath, put my socks on, stuff like that. It's only weird because I've always been the person that does that stuff. Hated being the hopeless one to the core of my being. A few years later and our son died. We are kinda holding each other up now. Cancer. My husband was very weak and sick from immunotherapy. We landed in the ER for hydration and fevers more than once. I always wiped his ass. He was sick. I'm a nurse. I know the staff nurses think nothing of it, but he's mine and that's what I can do. We are no longer together, but my ex-boyfriend had a stroke while at the gym. I wasn't able to see him until the next day due to COVID restrictions in the emergency room. When I went to visit him the next day, I watched him have another stroke. It was terrifying seeing how scared he was. It was the first time I had ever seen him that vulnerable. I had seen him emotional on occasions, but nothing like this. It was pure fear and confusion. He kept asking me the same questions over and over and saying the same statements. I was trying my best to keep myself together, but the more he repeated himself, the harder it got. My wife is constantly doing things for me that make me a little gooey on the inside. Today, it was the fact that she went and bought me my favorite candy bar, and didn't tell me. So when I opened the fridge, it was there. I was so happy. So for context, my wife grew up living next door to her grandmother. They had a relationship that only Disney or Hallmark could really capture. Early in our dating period, we had taken a weekend trip to NYC to see a comedy show. One joke in particular was, "What's the meanest thing you can say to someone without cursing? You look fat when you cry." FYI, she found this particularly funny for some reason. The weekend got cut short when her 97-year-old grandmother slipped, fell and passed away. At the funeral she was hysterical. After I had gone up to the casket and paid my respects, I walk over to the front row, and as she is absolutely bawling her eyes out, I bend down and whisper into her ear, "Careful. You look fat when you cry." She immediately starts laughing so hard she had to leave the room. She never told anyone what I said, and her relatives to this day still ask. To the outsider this may look strange, but my wife still to this day talks about how I snapped her out of her worst depression with a one-liner. That is hilarious and adorable. Smile. Less than 3.